Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my compilation of my reviews for HBO's Band of Brothers. I hope you enjoy it, and so let us begin. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company or EZ Company of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, it follows their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Kira Hay, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be one episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today is going to be my review of part 1, episode 1, Kira Hay, which the name comes from where a mountain, which is in the Appalachian foothills, I believe. Yeah, Appalachian foothills in Georgia by Camp Toccoa, which is where EZ Company trained. So we are introduced to essentially the main characters. Of course, characters get added and subtracted, which makes sense. This is following them through a war. We learn their training, we see them go on marches, we see them go on runs, and a big part of their training is running to the top of Kira Hay, going to the top of that mountain, 3 miles up and down. And we are showing them doing it in several different conditions. We're showing them doing it in PT uniforms. We're showing them doing it for a field pack. We even get one episode where their Captain Sobel, who was training them, basically says, "You know what? They deserve it." Tells Winters they deserve a day off, so give them a good meal. And then he cancels the meal during the meal and tells them to run up. So it's spaghetti meatballs, so it's not the best meal to be running off of. But in some ways, I did some research. A lot of that does make sense. It gave them very hard training, but also prepared them for very rough conditions in combat and war. You never know what you're going to face. So in some ways, you do kind of need training to be rough and hard, so that way a soldier can perform the best and survive. Now, of course, we do get to see, though, near the end, and like the last thing training exercise before they are shipped off to Europe, Steve Sobel make a bad call and gets the entirety of EZ Company killed in the training exercise. So not really killed, but it does show, they grew to respect him in some regards for him. They didn't always like him pushing, but you can tell that the men of EZ Company did grow to respect him. But for how they trained him, but as soon as they started going beyond the physical training into the combat training, you see that respect begin to deplete. And then it gets to the point where when they're in England, same thing keeps on happening. He makes bad calls. Granted, they do prank him once, and that doesn't help. But it gets to the point where all the NCOs are starting to resign because they don't trust his leadership. So basically, what probably the regimental colonel decides is, okay, we're going to transfer Sobel, but we're also going to have to demote and reassign all the staff sergeants, all the sergeants, all the NCOs, because that's not good. So a bunch of personnel reshuffling just in time for Operation Overload, which is going to be talk about the next review. But that is showing something, showing that the U.S. Army does value the judgment of the NCOs, but at the same time, they couldn't tolerate the behavior, so they did their best of both worlds, just move everyone around, and there we go. So, as I said, this is the first episode. It's probably, it involves just their training, but very important is establishing who EZ Company is. It's setting the ground, introducing us to the killers. Winters, Richard Winters, I get these names here. Sobel, but he doesn't come back, but he does come back, but not really. The regimental commander, Colonel Stink, yes, that's his name. Let's see, also, I'm looking at cast of characters too. But like several of the soldiers too, many of them are introduced in here, which comes to play a big role later on in the show after the D-Day invasion, the episode replacement. So we're going to talk about that when we get to that point in the story. But like, I'm looking at these, there's other lieutenants and sergeants and soldiers, all that, but we get to introduce us to the characters. Since this is a historical miniseries, it's not a documentary. Let's make that clear. This is not a documentary, but it is still a history production. Therefore, it does need to be historically accurate, or should I say authentic. I do think there's a difference between historical accuracy and authenticity. Accurate is when you get the minutiae right. So you're getting things like uniforms right. You're getting food right. You're getting basically the trivial knowledge that sets the world. You're getting the large course events correct. Authenticity is when you make it feel right. You may have to make some changes to make it fit for the big screen or the small screen. Some changes there, but you're still true to what happened. You may have to condense characters and that, but you're still authentic to the history. This character may not have did that action, but this character who he worked with did. Meanwhile, if it wasn't, all historically, essentially they go hand in hand and you need them both together. But there is a slight difference. You can be accurate to every single detail and still be not authentic. But you can also be authentic but not accurate. They go hand in hand, and when you get both together, it's correct, it's good. It teaches history but can still be entertaining. And Band of Brothers, like all non-documentaries, it does not get everything perfect. And we'll talk about that later in another part. But while it may not get every detail right, it gets the experience, it gets the feeling right, it gets the minutiae right. And that creates a believable world. But even more than that, it creates a scenario where, yes, this is what happened. Maybe some things are slightly different, but they not only made it accurate, but they made it authentic to the experiences of the men of Easy Company, the Band of Brothers who fought in the European theater of World War II. So that is actually where I'm going to end this review. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear your thoughts on part 1 of Band of Brothers down below. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555 and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company or Easy Company of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way so I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, it follows their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Kira Hay, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be 1 episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today is going to be my review of part 2, episode 2, Day of Days. So this is Operation Overlord, D-Day. This is them parachuting into Normandy for the invasion. So we get to see them scattered, we get to see them working with other regiments and other units, sometimes even other divisions, all as they try to reform and accomplish the task of basically targeting key bridges, delaying German reinforcements, so that way the actual invasion comes. We get to see Easy Company through this. We also get to see several other things too, like we see soldiers grow into their own, figure out actually how to do combat rather than just a combat training. One of the main officers we follow is at this point Lieutenant Winters. He has not been promoted to captain yet, but we see him prove himself as a leader that we'll come to see in later parts, who is well respected by the men of Easy Company, and he forms a bond with Easy Company that in later parts we see is very hard for him to let go of, even though as later on he's given more responsibility in the 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment. We see that later on, but right now we're focusing on this episode showing him bonding with his men, and we see the men bonding with each other. They're a band of brothers for a reason, and even across the enlisted NCO and officer level, there is this bonding taking place, and we really do get to see that in this part. We get to also see a lot of the other stuff going on as well. One thing is we see the horrors of war. We see them in difficult situations. We even see a situation where it's strongly implied, that one of the platoon leaders, or was it? Yeah, I think one of the platoon leaders. It was either a platoon leader or a platoon leader in another regiment or another company. It's implied that he executes a bunch of prisoners that they had taken, and this is, of course, before they meet up with the main force. So you can see kind of what's going on, but they imply that, strongly imply it, but they also, what helps that implication in creating emotion in us is one of those Germans is actually a German American, who basically was convinced to join up to fight for Nazi Germany. That did happen in real life. It's very sad, but that stuff was made, and some of those they were either loyal to the fatherland or loyal to the ideology. It could go either way. In some cases it's hard to tell without the records. But one interesting thing is, I want to bring in the TV show Hogan's Heroes. That was a pure comedy, but they do show a similar character, but I feel like they're probably a bit more okay, they are fascinating in history. There might have been a few of those German-American Bund, so those German-Americans who signed up to fight with Nazi Germany in World War II. There might have been some who did, realize, yeah, we can't do this and fight from the inside. But I have a feeling that was pretty rare, and Hogan's Heroes got that history wrong. It's obvious that was not a very historically accurate show. Fun, but not accurate. Band of Brothers, on the other hand, shows a German-American Bund person who essentially was probably in it for real. Now, that might have been because of loyalty to Germany, not necessarily to the fascist ideology of Nazi Germany. It could go either way. And again, we don't know for sure because the show never told us. But by establishing that this one person was an American, a German American, that makes us emphasize with him a bit more. A good show will show the conflicting emotions, a good history with conflicting emotions of the people involved. And even those, and one of the soldiers, I forget his name, should have double checked this, but he's when he meets and talks, they live within blocks of each other, and then he hears the gunshots, and that, you can tell he's unsettled by that. Did they just kill? One of them was an American. Did that officer just kill them? But doesn't we say it out loud? But then later on in one of the other parts, we see them all speculating about this officer. Did he actually do it? And all the different rumors that have gone around beyond it. So that is showing the darker side. Americans, they were objectively, I would say, the good guys in World War II. I mean, even the American, Japanese internment camps, which were essentially concentration camps, but I would say if we have to rank them, they were much lower down because they, weren't intended to actually kill the Japanese Americans interned there, unlike the concentration camps. They weren't in work camps and all that, but the German concentration camps of World War II they were work camps, they were death camps. They were not designed out of the same root of feel, but very different in terms of execution or even a bunch of other stuff. In some ways, this episode doesn't really address that stuff yet, and actually it doesn't really talk about the Japanese in the Pacific that much at all in Band of Brothers until, I believe, Points, which is at the end. But the fact that this episode made me think of that, and how it is showing that Americans were not perfect, that at least individual Americans made mistakes, and that things did not necessarily get punished later on. We never see this character ever get an actual punishment for what he is implied to have done. And it's pretty much assumed that he did do it. That's kind of how pretty much every character takes it, but they really don't speak on it even later on. And of course, because we also see then, not just the darker side, but also the heroics of the Americans, of stopping the Germans, of delaying the Germans, so that way the D-Day landings could happen. Tom Hanks starred, of course, in Saving Private Ryan, and that showed the D-Day invasion. Pretty much everything after them getting on the beaches is not as historically accurate in terms of events, so I would still say authentic in terms of presents a realistic world. We see combat, that stuff is accurate but not authentic to the history. Again, I talked about this in my last part, but there is a difference. You could have something be historically authentic, but still not be accurate to what happened. In some ways, good historical fiction is authentic, but it's not accurate. So accurate, you're not only getting the minutiae right, but you're also getting the events right. Authenticity means you get the minutiae right, but not necessarily the events. I think that's a good way of describing the difference. Both have their purposes, and both help convey the sense of the event, of the historical event, or series of events, or time frame that you are showing. Band of Brothers is more accurate than Saving Private Ryan, only because it's more accurate in terms of events. It doesn't create a series of events to put characters into an authentic World War II environment. So that's the difference between them, and I think something important to take a note. But yeah, we see bunch going on, but we do see the good and the bad, and that is where I'm going to end this review of Band of Brothers, Day of Days. There is John Berry 555, and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company, or Easy Company, of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way so I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, it follows their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Kira Hay, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be one episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today I'm going to be reviewing part 3, which is also episode 3, Karen Tan. I'm butchering that French name, obviously, but we're just jumping right on into it. So this is a battle later on, and actually this is the episode from last where they were talking about the character, or the officer was Spears. Basically the rumor is the rumor that he killed a bunch of German prisoners, which was heavily implied in the last episode. Now we're seeing the characters speculate on that. This is coming off of the D-Day invasions and all that, but we're seeing more progress being made. We're seeing the fighting from hedge road to hedge road. We actually see also like one private in Blythe who is suffering from shell shock, so PTSD, in the midst of the battlefield. And Spears is giving him advice, but it's not the healthiest advice, I think, that a person in his condition who is suffering from PTSD right after the event that caused it should be getting. He should have been, in a perfect world, he would have been rotated out and talked to counselors, not given advice by an officer who it's kind of implied that is a bit more aggressive than a lot of his counterparts, and aggressive in terms of battlefield and ruthless in what he's willing to do to accomplish their goals. But in the end, let's see. Now, one thing to note, this is actually probably one of the things they did get inaccurate. There was an event at the end where Private Blythe is shot by a sniper. What's inaccurate is that the episode ends with a statement that he never recovered from his wounds and died in 1948. That actually did not happen. He recovered and he actually continued to serve until his death in 1967. Now that is actually quite interesting. They did make a lot of effort to try to be as accurate as possible, but the main source of information were the men of Easy Company, their memoirs, their recollections, the oral histories collected from them. So what ended happening is everyone in Easy Company assumed he died of his wounds in 1948, I'm going to guess. Probably because that's maybe the last time they heard of him. They assume he eventually died. So that's what happened in the show, or in this miniseries. So later, circulation came like, oh, this guy's alive, and that was after this had been filmed and released. But that is actually an interesting scenario, and something very important. Our history is only as accurate as the records we have access to. If we don't have the right records, or the accurate records, we won't always be able to get an accurate history. We can be still authentic, but we may not be as accurate as we would hope or want because we are missing a crucial piece of information. In some ways, this is something an archaeologist knows all too well. They have to build with what they have. They know that when they're researching ancient civilizations on an archaeological dig, they are missing so much information that they have to piece stuff together, and in some cases make logical inferences and assumptions because they don't have enough information because it's not there. That is something that anyone in the history field needs to understand, and even people who are not interested in history or have studied history, that you're only interested, like you watch historical films and that, just remember that assuming they're trying to be truthful and authentic and accurate, if they're missing information, they may not be as accurate as they would want. And that's something to be important. You can even get a well-researched history book and comes out, it's not, and then 20 years later, a correction's released because something's not accurate in there, because something they didn't know, new evidence was uncovered. A memoir that was previously unpublished was sitting in somebody's attic, and it was found. Historical revisionism is not just, as I was saying, is not just, correcting misinterpretations of history. It's also about taking new evidence. Sometimes that evidence may have been known, sometimes it may not have been, but creating that new evidence, that new historical artifact or piece of information, and bringing it into history as a whole, bringing it into the interpretation of the story, of the event. That's historical revisionism can sometimes be used for nefarious purposes. There's no doubt about that. Propaganda is a thing. But true, proper historical revisionism is not about is not about erasing history. It's not about changing history to support some ideological narrative. It's about being truthful and accurate and authentic to what has happened, and you're adjusting the interpretation based off of new evidence, a new piece of information that you didn't have access to. And this episode is a perfect example of that. They made an inaccurate event, a statement, despite being totally authentic, because they didn't have the right information at hand. That's actually very important. That's historiography, the history of something. And so that is something, as new pieces of information occur, not only does the history change, but the historiography changes as we update that information to reflect the new information we now have access to. And then there's a few other things going on in here too. We see Winter's further grow as a leader, taking action and all that during one of the battles, which is the Battle of Bloody Gulch, which literally isn't a gulch, and they just routed the Germans, but while also being overwhelmed by the Germans because of the scenario they were in. Quite very emotional, very fascinating, all that. But I just kind of wanted to touch that on a little bit. But the main heart of this episode, I'm taking from that last statement that was inaccurate because the information wasn't there until later. And how that relates to historical revisionism and historiography, and how, as people interested in history, we always should be striving to make the history more accurate when we see new information come forward. New information comes forward, we need to reevaluate the historical interpretation based off of that new information, that new evidence. There is JohnBerry555, and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview, real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company, or EZ Company, of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way so I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, it follows their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Kira Hay, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be one episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today we're going to be talking about part 4, which is episode 4, of course, replacements. So this episode basically deals with replacing everyone who was lost after the D-Day invasions after Normandy. So, and the struggles of integrating those new people into Easy Company. And there's essentially, the new people are not being welcomed by those survivors of Normandy. And the Normandy survivors see them as replacements, not new brothers to make, but as people replacing people they lost, people they have become friends, brothers with. That's the heart of this episode. And of course, also about replacing leadership positions and all that as well, and tensions there. And also this is also occurs during Operation Market Garden, which was pretty much the second and pretty much the second big airborne operation of World War II. This was actually the brainchild of Montgomery, of the British general, and it did not go super well. Famously, there's a movie called The Bridge Too Far, also about this event as well. Granted, it does deflect a little more responsibility for Montgomery than probably should, but at the same time, this was a huge event and was trying to basically get to the Rhine River in the Netherlands. And we see actually a lot of the local Dutch coming out and welcoming the Americans for, liberating them. Which this is actually the first time we've really seen civilians in Band of Brothers. Besides, English civilians a little bit in part 1. But this is very much, we see them liberated, but we also see a lot of fighting too. But the main part is not so much the fighting in those events, it's about the old characters adjusting to new characters coming in. In fact, we see actually Winters is properly promoted to captain. He's in command of all of Easy Company, not just one of the platoons. He's a proper captain now. He's fully in command. And all that. Let's see, Yeah, and we actually get to see one character, because Operation Market Garden was not a successful operation. It wasn't. We actually see in one case, one of the members, a Bull, Raiderman, and Bull was his nickname, his actual name was Denver. He's left behind wounded. He actually is asked to be left behind so his comrades, his brothers, his band can escape to safety. But we also see that he's rescued the next day, so Easy Company and other American forces push forward once again, so they're able to shoot, so he's able to rescue, but we also see his struggle to survival. But this is all, and this, you can kind of see, the replacements are starting to get more accepted because of these events, because of fighting alongside the older members, the original members. That helps create a bond between them. It's never not saw it as a bond between those who have been through Normandy, but it started creating a bond between them. And from what I understand, replacements in the military unit have always been a struggle in the military. Not getting those replacements, but integrating those replacements into an existing military unit. It's probably much easier when it's just one or two replacing somebody who, retired or it was rotated home, but replacing someone who's killed, there's more emotion in that. And we see Easy Company struggle with that. And that's really the heart of this episode. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555 and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company or Easy Company of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, it follows their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Kira Hay, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be one episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today we're going to be talking about part 5, which is of course episode 5, Crossroads. So this is actually a very different episode so far. Before we the men of Easy Company doing training, doing fighting. But this time, we are following the events through an after-action report that Winters is writing. So it's already a different take, a different tone that they're doing. So Winters is basically doing an after-action report after they encountered a German counteroffensive on the it's saying that the Germans made counteroffensive. And he's actually doing this troubled by the fact he shot an unarmed Waffen-SS soldier. Now, teenager, this is a young person who probably was, has been indoctrinated probably their entire life by now, has really just been indoctrinated and joins the Waffen-SS. This is not the Wehrmacht. The clean Wehrmacht myth is just that. It's a myth. It's not true. The Wehrmacht were equally responsible for the atrocities that were committed by the SS and the Waffen-SS. But the thing is, they were complicit. The Wehrmacht was complicit. They enabled, but they were not the diehards of the Nazi ideology. No, those who were the diehards of Nazi ideology generally ended up in the SS, or more specifically the Waffen-SS, which was the combat arm of the SS. That's who this teenage boy that went to this trouble that he shot. Now, granted, did he really fully grasp what we know now about the Waffen-SS? Probably not, but here he is. It's an offensive, and he's fighting the Germans. But this kid is stated to have somebody's motorcycle decides to interrupt this very important historical review. But as I was saying, this teenage boy was unarmed during this. It was also, probably Winters did not realize this time, but we know now, was indoctrinated. In some ways, it makes sense. And in Winters, this shows his humanity that he is troubled by this. He doesn't like killing for the sake of killing, which I think is a very important thing for a soldier. They kill because they have to, not because they want to or even like it. But it makes sense that he is troubled by this. And despite what we know the Waffen-SS did, it's okay for Winters to be troubled. That's the emotion he felt. Emotions are valid. And war is tough on soldiers. There's a reason why so many soldiers come back from war with severe PTSD. It's because they're human and they're put through difficult, tough situations where they end up killing teenagers, even indoctrinated teenagers. It happens. And it's tragic, no matter what. Even despite their ideology, it's tragic. Because the best case scenario would be if you could break through that ideological indoctrination and help them see the error of the ways. But in war, that's often not a possibility. So it makes sense that Winters is he's conflicted about this, because he knew what he did was militarily the right choice, but morally, very morally great that, there should have been a better option. This soldier, in that moment, wasn't trying to kill him. Maybe later would have, but we don't know. But that's why this episode is so important, because it shows that conflict. It shows the humanity among both sides. We don't want both sides when both sides aren't equal, but it's still important to understand that humans are involved in war. And even the bad guys, even the enemy, even the indoctrinated enemy, still has humans who have been indoctrinated, have been tricked by those above them, by their leaders. Sometimes and tricked into respecting them and to following the orders unquestionably. It sadly happens. They still need to be held accountable for their actions, of course, but it does show that it can happen to anyone. A teenage boy can be indoctrinated just like a disgruntled veteran of World War I. It can happen to anyone. And that's what this is showing. And showing the humanity of the Americans, that the Americans are not an ideologically pure force liberating Europe. They have emotions as well. They have emotions. They can feel conflict about their actions that they're taking. That is so important to show. And that's really the take away from Crossroads. And it happens at the Crossroads too. But it's really a crossroads of the events, of things occurring, of characters coming to terms. They're at the crossroads in their character journey, or in this case their personal journey, since these are based off of the real experiences of the men of Easy Company. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview, real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company or EZ Company of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way so I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, it follows their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Kira Hay, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be one episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today I'm going to be talking about part 6, Battalion. So this is essentially EZ Company doing the Battle of the Bulge, and they're specifically helping to defend the town of Battalion. They're cut off from supplies, it's cold, they're not in the best situation. And this is showing them struggling. They're lacking supplies. We actually get to follow the medic of EZ Company, so Eugene Rowe, who's nicknamed Doc, Medic Doc, makes sense, that's his nickname. He's helping soldiers, he's scrounging for medical supplies, and he actually befriends a nurse, a Belgian nurse that's helping to take care, and the ends with her being killed during a bombing. Well, essentially the hospital, which is actually with the church in Bastogne, is hit, and she unfortunately doesn't make it. And one thing we know about Doc is Eugene, that he's from Louisiana. He's a Cajun, so he knows French decent. He knows French, Cajun French, but that means he does know some French, which gives us a big insight into his character and allows him to communicate pretty effectively with the local Belgians, many of who, especially because they're in Wallonia and not Flanders, speak French. But yeah, and we also get EZ Company surrounded, but so is everyone else in Bastogne and surrender. This is actually when a U.S. Army general, I forget his name off the top of my head, but when asked for surrender, gives the reply, nuts. Which supposedly was very difficult for the Germans to translate it into German, which makes sense. I guess the easiest translation would be no, but I'm trying to, I don't have a strong grasp of the German language, but yeah, it would make sense. In American English especially, when we say nuts, we mean, essentially it's a more polite way of swearing without swearing. It's that kind of stuff. But yeah, so this episode is really about Eugene. Sure, we see more insight into Captain Winters. At this point, if he's out there with the men, freezing off, basically, and I'm going to my language, but it's true. He's freezing his ass off with them. They're in tough situations, but this is showing more of them bonding, how they're a band of brothers, living through the same experiences. But this one is probably more than others, showing us, we hadn't explored yet. We've seen people talk to him, but we're really exploring Eugene's character, showing how he's there not to fight, but to basically help his brothers, help his comrades in arms. He's there to make sure they survive. He's scrounging for medical supplies. Generally what it is that, as I understand it, is every American soldier was issued with a small emergency medical kit. So it had, I think, a dose of morphine and a bandage. Pretty much that was it, just so that way, while they're waiting for the medic to come, they can maybe get a band-aid or get some morphine so they can deal with the pain. But they're so strapped for supplies, Eugene is basically begging them to give me what you have, so I have it, so that in case something happens, I have these supplies. There's even situations where one soldier is like, don't give me any, Doc, save what you have for somebody else. And that's just showing how desperate it was. Now, at the end, I believe it does show that with the U.S. Army Air Force airdropping supplies in for them, and that did happen. It was actually quite successful, but the first drop, I believe, only gave enough supplies for one day, and this was a huge operation. I believe it was over 20 planes, maybe even up to 50 planes involved, yet it was only a day's worth of supplies. So until reinforcements could get in, punch through the German lines and right in the front, so that way they had road access, EZ Company and a bunch of other companies and divisions or regiments were entirely cut off from reinforcements. Probably the closest, not fully encircled, but pretty much encircled, that can supply. And we see with Eugene scavenging, we see him scavenging from fellow soldiers, scavenging from dead Germans, and also when he goes to incoming one injured soldier to Bastogne, where they have a field hospital set up inside church, in the church there. He's scavenging for supplies there, asking, what do you have that you can spare? I need stuff. And that's when he meets that Belgian nurse and befriends. And it's quite nice to see, that humanity there, that these are human characters, that they're struggling, but also that they are capable of making friends, bonding over something as simple as being able to speak to each other, as when they may not have expected to have been. And that is so lovely to see in the heart of this episode. So I would like to say thank you for watching. Please let me know in the comment section down below, what did you think of Bastogne? I would love to hear from you. There is JohnBerry555 and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company or EZ Company of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way so I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, it follows their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Kira Hay, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be one episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today we're going to be talking about part 7, which is episode 7, the breaking point. So by this point, Captain Winters has been promoted to a position in the battalion. So I think and that happened actually a couple episodes ago if I remember correctly. But it's more important now. The EZ Company is holding the line, but he's not in charge of just EZ Company anymore. There is a new company commander. This is this is the First Lieutenant Norman Dyke is the new commander of EZ Company. We see a bunch going on. Act 5, there's 2 soldiers who lose their legs, which is witnessed by another one of the platoon leaders, Lieutenant Buck Compton, who's friends with Winters. And actually, this is a character who throughout he was basically smuggled a bunch of, I think, something, I forget exactly the name, but a specific brand of whiskey that is the only whiskey he's been drinking this entire time, and he's hiding it among Winter's effects because who would look there? Because he doesn't drink. It's kind of funny, but that's just kind of the context for this character. But they're holding the line in Belgium, but they're losing a lot. New company commander who the company is not jiving well with, which does make sense. Yeah, and actually there's one point where Dyke's leadership is failing, and this leads to Winters ordering Spears which is that guy from earlier who was rumored to have shot was gossiped to have shot a bunch of German soldiers during D-Day, after they had surrendered, orders him to relieve Buck and take command, and this allows them to win. Now, and that was right after, Winters did that right after the colonel ordered him, EZ Company is not your responsibility, you're not in charge of EZ Company anymore, I know you're fond of them, but you're not in charge. So he orders Spears to go basically fix the situation for them, which shows also good leadership from him, realizing that he has to stay where he is. He can't go out into the field to help EZ Company anymore. He orders somebody he knows who can do the job to go do it. That's showing good leadership in him, but also showing his struggle with kind of accepting that he's not in command of EZ Company like he used to be, that he can't be there in the field with them all the time, that he kind of needs to learn that as long as they got the right people in charge, they will be fine. And that's what we see him learn in this episode, him struggle with. And of course we also see Easy Company are just having to adjust to this change, which is not the best until Spears is the one who's fully in charge, because while they may have gossip about him and all that, it's not like they don't trust him. They do trust his judgment. They don't have a trust issue. They are not unsettled by him. Well, maybe a little bit like those rumors, but again, for them, those are the rumors. They don't know if it happened, and he's been there for them. He's helped them. He hasn't abandoned them. He hasn't failed to give he hasn't given them bad orders, per se, maybe in a bad situation with them, but has not been responsible for making the situation worse. And that's kind of what's showing here, and Spears ends up being given command after the dike is removed. And actually, we also see here that the first sergeant he's given a field commission, becoming a second lieutenant, and that makes sense. Even among enlisted, they are learning valuable skills in wartime when you need good, competent officers. It makes sense to promote a highly competent NCO, a first sergeant in a company who is going to be very competent. You give them the option to be promoted to, given a field commission, and so that way that can help other units out, or even your own unit, depends on the situation. So that's where I'm going to end this review. Again, the heart of the episode was Easy Company struggling to a change of leadership. They've had changes of leadership before when Winters took over for Sobol, but that was a very different scenario. That was them. Winters was already one of them. They trusted and respected his judgment. They weren't respecting Sobol's judgment. But Winters, they respected his judgment, and they couldn't rely on Winters to be there for them anymore, and Winters couldn't be there for them because he has greater responsibility beyond Easy Company now. So this is them both adjusting to this change of situation, to this change in their band of brothers. Smaller change nevertheless, because Winters still is shown in later episodes to still be there following Easy Company, but he can't be there in the same way he used to be. There is JohnBerry555, and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company, or Easy Company, of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way so I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, it follows their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Kira Hay, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be one episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today I'm going to be talking about part 8, which is episode 8, of course, The Last Patrol. Now, real quick, I need to make a correction. Before I said it was Lieutenant Compton who was drinking the vat where was ended up 69 whiskey. No, it was actually Nixon. Captain Lewis Nixon by the point of episode 9, because he's trying to scavenge for it in episode 9. We're talking about part 8, but I just realized my notes I had made a mistake, so I just thought I would correct that before we go on. So in part 8, The Last Patrol, they're being withdrawn from active combat. That means they still got duties and patrol duties, but they're not in combat, they're not on the front. They're not on the front lines anymore. And during this episode, one of the former members of Easy Company was there with them during D-Day, comes back from the hospital. But he's given a cold welcome because he did not break out of the hospital to rejoin the fight, which many others had already done by that point. So that gives him kind of a rough start. No, his squadron platoon didn't want him, so he's pushed on to the other platoon. But during the same time, they get a new lieutenant who's just graduated from West Point. So both of them are, but one of them has experience, is being treated just like the replacements were a couple episodes ago during replacements. The replacements, sure, he was with them before, but was he really? He didn't come back, he didn't break out of the hospital like so many others did, which is something interesting to know. It's showing tension there. And of course, during all this they're doing patrols and all that, and in fact they're given a task to sneak across the river and blow up a German listening post, I believe, or outpost. Basically, just to say an outpost. And so Webster and Webster and Jones, that's the new Lieutenant Jones, they both take a part in that, and by doing so they gain some respect. So Webster regains regains the respect he had lost, and Jones, he also gains respect because he's not just a replacement anymore. He's still new, but he's alright kind of mentality. And that's what's showing there. Granted, this is also showing with Carlwood Limpton, the first sergeant who was going to be given a field commission. We see that happen. We also see him taking on more leadership duties as well, which kind of shows that he's getting ready for that said field promotion. And actually we get to see Jones Digger's some respect. He's promoted and sent off to regimental staff, so that shows, that he gained some respect. He now jive with them, and he was not really a part of the band of brothers, which is kind of interesting, but it does show that bonds forged during battle can be very tight, and new people coming in, even old people from those same bonds, can be hard for them to integrate, and sometimes just gotta find a different place for them if they just can't integrate. Now, was that the reason why he was removed and set up to regimental? Probably not, but that is the theme, the message that this episode is putting out. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555, and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company, or EZ Company, of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way so I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, it follows their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Kira Hay, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be one episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today we're going to be talking about the hardest thing I've ever had to watch. This is part 9, episode 9, Why We Fight. This is the hardest one for me. I paused this one, I lost count, several times. It's just, I think you know what I'm getting at. This is when they discover a concentration camp. This is the hardest one for me. It's just so emotional. I remember pausing several times, leading up to it, the dread. I knew what was coming. I knew what was coming when they didn't, because I know my history. And it was so hard. I paused, I think at least twice before they discovered the camp. And when they discovered it, I paused. I had to take walks. It was so emotional, so hard to watch. I know the history, but the emotions are still there. This, in some ways, when you have to stop something and pause, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. In this case, it's a good thing, because we can only imagine how hard it was for the soldiers who discovered the concentration camp. But the fact is, you make the emotion so hard that you actually have to stop watching just to process what you just watched, just so you could even continue, just to pause again in another few minutes. It is so hard to watch. But in sense, it makes sense why this is one. This is why, the episode is why we fight for a reason. They are struggling. Captain Nixon, with, he's pretty much out of his favorite whiskey, VAT 69, so he's trying to find some, because he really doesn't want to drink the local stuff. He has his preferred brand. You have also just EZ Company as a whole. They just kind of they've been there, so many of them have died. They're losing the will, not the will to fight, why they're in this. But then they discover a concentration camp. It enrages them. It breaks them. It is so hard. It is so hard for them. It's hard for me to watch, and It's just, there's a reason why this review is going to be the only one where I'm not having Band of Brothers in the title, where I'm just simply calling it the hardest thing I've ever watched. Because that's what it is. There's been other shows I've watched where I've paused, had to take a break, but that's normally not because it was difficult or too emotional, but because, like, I know exactly what's going to happen. And for those shows, it was not in a good way like this. If this can be considered a good way. But I'm talking about good from well done story. Well done filming. Before it was always like, I know exactly what's going to happen. They're trying to be not either sneaky or clever, and it's just not working. I can't believe they're doing this. But here, it's so different. Here, it's raw. It's emotional. It's difficult. These are tragic events. Events that should never be forgotten. But it's hard to watch. Because it's so tragic. So brutal what happened to the victims of the Holocaust. It is just hard. It is full of emotion. It's a tragedy. I'm just trying to describe it in the best I can. I'm struggling not to break down. I cried watching this. There's been other times where I've cried when watching something sad, but there's two different kinds of crying. Your simple tearing up cry, and where your eyes are physically struggling not to cry. That's the kind of cry this is. This is not just a tear escaping. This is just a difficult thing. Like, your entire body knows what's going to happen. Your body is fighting against it, but it needs to do it. It's emotional, tragic, and I'm getting the same. I didn't rewatch this episode, and that's simply because I don't know if I can ever actually rewatch it. But that's, in a way, a huge endorsement of it. Because it's so emotional, I don't know if I can bear those emotions again. Some of the best Holocaust films out there many people have those same reactions. It's just so emotional. You can only watch it once or twice, and that's it, because it's just too emotional, too raw, too emotional. There's no other way. In some ways, I think back to how sometimes, before, face-to-face communication, language had to be a lot more adjective or flowery, for a better term, to really convey things like, Eleanor of Aquitaine, after Richard the Lionheart was being put up for ransom by the Holy Roman Empire, like, she wrote a letter to the Pope where she described that she would rather be dead than her son be captured, and bunch of crazy stuff like, that makes no sense, and probably she didn't actually want to do it, but it was the best way of conveying her emotions. And that's why I'm struggling with her. How to convey the emotions I felt about this episode without going over the top or being disrespectful. It is a struggle. And that's why this is the hardest thing I ever watched. Not just was it hard for me to watch, but it's also hard for me to describe why it was so hard. Perhaps the only way for you to understand my emotions is to watch it yourself. There's so much more I could talk about in here, but the main thing is the members don't believe that the Germans were the members of the Reading Company. They don't believe the Germans didn't know what was going on. But the thing is, this happened over and over. Concentration camps would be liberated by the Allies, Western Allies, and they were in shock, disgust, and there were many cases where they started killing prisoners because they were just so angry, so mad, because they were disgusted by what had occurred there, so they took it out on the guards. In some cases, you had surrendered, some cases had vanished. There was I know one story. One of the first concentration camp liberated by the Allies. By the time of Easing Company, the first one had already been discovered. The concentration they come as a sub one of Dachau, so the most notorious one, the first one. Well, concentration, not death camp. There's a difference. There is a huge difference. You could get killed at a concentration camp, but you were also being worked to death. You were not there just to be killed. That's the only difference. A death camp like Auschwitz was sole purpose to kill. All the concentration camps like Dachau were there to work you to death. Tragic, ruthless, disgusting. But it's a fact. That's history. And we can't forget it. Okay, calm down after all that. But, so they discovered the camp. Actually, I was going to say, there's stories of American soldiers, forcing German civilians nearby to go and take a look at what it is, by gunpoint. That wasn't shown here because that didn't happen in this case. But it probably did. But it is true that the area was placed under martial law, and the civilians were ordered to bury the bodies. And also probably one of the things that also got me to pause is, so they want to do something to help the concentration camp victims. And so they go in, basically take whatever food and water they can in town, but eventually regimental, and in fact maybe even higher up, like brigade comes up and so basically the surgeon does it. You can't give them food and water. They gotta be carefully giving them food slowly and all that. And close the camp. We don't have a place for them. Gotta keep them there for now. And that's hard for easy company to do because they're seeing people suffering. They want to do something, but the thing they have to do medically is hard for them to do because it seems heartless. Like if someone is hungry, your instinct is to give them food and water, not wait for doctors to come up to give them, to slowly build up their stomach and to slowly give them food again. Because the sad truth is people who are in such, not just hungry, like if you haven't had food all day, you're hungry, that kind of hunger? Yeah, that's like this. This is, you haven't had food in weeks, if not months. And if you eat a normal meal, you're going to get sick. Your body has adjusted to no food. And so, we saw this with many prisoners in the Pacific too. They get rescued, eat a meal, and they end up sick because they couldn't take the food. And that's for what has to happen here. The concentration camp victims can't be fed yet because they need to be done so under medical supervision. So like small amounts of food. So like probably starts with maybe a slice of bread and a sip of water and whatever it is they decide to feed. And probably can't do too rich of foods as well. That's what this episode is about. Sure, they're also, going into Bavaria, Berchtesgaden, going after that stuff. But that's all minor. In fact, that's actually in the next episode. But they're on the way there at this episode. But this episode is about essentially showing the men of Easy Company regaining their will to fight and why they're fighting again. But having to do so in the most hard way possible, the tragedy of it all. Again, there's a reason why this episode is the hardest thing I've ever had to watch, and probably the hardest review I've ever had to make. I've had difficult reviews before, like struggling for motivation, but this is hard in a different way. Not hard in terms of technical stuff or just getting the motivation you're going to do it. This is hard from an emotional standpoint. I may even have to take a break before I record my last review for this. I'm recording these all in one sitting, and it's hard now. It was getting tough before because, I've been doing a lot, but this is hard in a different way, in a draining way. It's drained me. So much emotion, it's so hard to put it out there for me. I'm an introvert naturally, so it's hard for me to put myself out there too much. There's a reason why my better streams are my shorter ones. I'm better engaged, I'm not tired. But this is giving me that same feeling, tiring me out because I'm putting myself out emotionally in a way I am not used to. This is the hardest thing for me to watch, and probably the hardest review I've ever had to done, and probably ever will done. Unless I go watch, one of the Holocaust films, which, again, emotionally, I don't know if I can. I should, from a historical standpoint, but the emotions are tough and are difficult. Hey there, it's JohnBerry555 and welcome to my 10-part miniseries where I'm going to be reviewing the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was created by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. So a quick overview real quick. The Band of Brothers follows E Company or Easy Company of the 505th, I believe, Parachute Infantry Division of the 101st Airborne. Not 505th, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. Have some notes here so that way so I can check this stuff up, make sure I got everything correct. But yeah, follow their adventures from basically their training all the way to being sent home. So we're going to start off with part 1, episode Q&A, and we're going to end up with part 10 points. So expect that this is going to be 1 episode a week, so this is going to be a 10-week long miniseries for me. And today we're going to be finishing up my review of Bayonet Brothers with episode 10, which is called part 10 points. So this is at the very end. They capture the Eagle's Nest, which is basically which is Hitler's headquarters in Berchtesgaden. They find a bunch of liquor in Hermann Göring's house, and of course Winters is allowing them to celebrate doing all this. They were doing occupation duty in Austria, and Winters actually does apply for a transfer to the Pacific Theater, but he gets denied kind of because they're also in charge, like, your men need you still here. You keep around your own men, which is kind of a weird way of saying, we don't want you. But that is kind of a thing, relatively Strasbourg, but men do continue to be injured and die. In fact, they show one where a relatively jumpy new recruit, that was earlier on, I didn't talk about, but basically, a drunk soldier kills an officer. Yeah. Well, actually, he doesn't kill, shoots an officer. Thankfully, this officer was well respected by Easy Company's men. So what they do is they find a German neurosurgeon or brain surgeon in the town, or Austrian, I should say, not German, and ask him, he needs help, and we don't have the resources. And thankfully, he does survive. And that's, I think, what prevents Easy Company from killing this drunk soldier who did the shooting. And I don't know who is named, some private, not a member of Easy Company, of course. And Easy Company basically goes on a manhunt for this dude, this drunk dude. And I think the fact that they left the fact that they got help for the officer who was shot, that they respected, that allowed Easy Company to, in a way, they did beat the guy up, but enough of their anger had been released, and hearing that the guy survived, probably saved that soldier's life. He was drunk, made a stupid decision, and all that. But yeah, and actually, this is why, giving drunk people access to guns is a bad idea. Yeah, and actually, young, drunk, stupid behavior occurs. Yeah, actually, kind of a sort of gun control message thrown into here. Very sort of course, but yeah. Not everyone should have a gun. They can be trusted. They should have a gun. Seems pretty reasonable to me. But also they get but there's also fun stuff. A company baseball game, and also there's talking about how they found ways, especially those who've been there, to transfer them home, get them transferred home. Like there's one they're doing this is a publicity tour. They need somebody to keep things accurate per se. Like they found various sorts of ways of transferring people, either if not stateside to maybe France or London or someplace outside, someplace better to get them closer to be able to get home. And I just found out that kind of, charming, endearing even. They're doing whatever they can to see these people need to get home early. So these people need to get home. They don't have enough points. So what can we do to help them get to that point? There's actually one point where a general authorizes a lottery where men who were within 10 points of being sent home but not quite yet could go in for a lottery. May not have been 10 points, but basically a lottery we'll choose one soldier to get sent home. There was another soldier we're recommending you for a field commission, but because of that you have to be sent someplace else, army policy and all that. And we can so tell that they're just finding any way possible to help their comrades, the Bayonet Brothers, help each other find their way back home, back to their family and friends that they hadn't seen in years. Sure, their Bayonet Brothers friends, their Bayonet Brothers, they will still mean something to each other, but they want them, helping them get home to their family, get out of the war situation. And also, thankfully, they do avoid also being shipped out to the Pacific, which was looking like that was going to happen. But thankfully, they avoided that. And yeah, and actually it's during that one of the activities they get to do, a baseball game, that's when the surrender of Japan is announcing that they're not going to the Pacific. But yeah, this episode is really about them kind of dealing with the war is essentially over, but it's not over. They're not home yet. They deserve to be home, but they just don't have the right points. That's the heart of this episode, them struggling. And this is, of course, all told through Winter's perspective, as he's finding ways, however he can, to help them get sent home, or help them deal with being in this situation. That's the heart of this episode. In a way, some ways, it's all about the band of brothers being disbanded. But this bond, while it's not is shown, remains. They're helping each other get home however they can, because they care about each other. They want them to see their brothers, their sisters, their fathers, their mothers. They want them home with their families again. So they're looking for ways not to send them home. Sure, they may be a band of brothers and will miss each other, but they care so much they're willing to do that. That's, I think, the heart and why they're a band of brothers. Also, there's another thing I would like to talk about. I want to talk about how this episode relates to the ending of MASH. I mean, it does in some ways. The end of MASH is a 2.5 hour long movie, pretty much. Goodbye, farewell, amen. And we see a bunch of characters who have formed a bond during war, having to say goodbye to each other as they're sent home at the end. Very similar situation. The point situation was still used in Korea, and that's brought up a couple times in MASH, too. In fact, there's one that, granted, they played more fast and loose because Howard and Goodbye for Amen, BJ get more points quicker than Hawkeye, who's been there longer. And all that, it's like, what? That doesn't make sense from how the point system works, to my understanding. But that's not the point of the episode. The point of the episode is just showing how a bunch of people who grew to kill each other, them having to separate at the end of the war. That's the same thread in both of these. They're done differently. In MASH, it's the characters having to say goodbye and struggling with that goodbye, as they all want to get home to their friends and family back in the States, but they're struggling to say goodbye to their newfound friends and family. Essentially, they're a band of brothers, if you will. But in Band of Brothers, it's a different scenario, or different emotions are being invoked. It's not so much that these characters in Band of Brothers are struggling to say goodbye to each other. Sure, there is some of that, but it's them struggling to help each other get home. The goodbye part's the easy part. The how can we get you home is the hard part. Similar premise, and war's over, time to go home. But it's what emotions are being addressed. MASH addresses the characters having to say goodbye and dealing with that. Essentially, like, what if that bond doesn't continue afterwards? How can we say goodbye? Meanwhile, in Band of Brothers, that bond is implied to still be there, and they're willing to put that bond at risk to help their brothers get home to their friends and family back in the States. That's the difference between the two, and both are equally important and equally emotional. They tug on the emotional heartstrings just differently enough that they're distinct, they're different, but they're also, there's that same current of that it's time for it's essentially time to end. Not in the same way, but the end is here, the war is over, things need to start getting back to normal. That's the same ending being implied in terms of the lives of the characters. Time to go home. That's the thing that's same. But what emotions they're trying to evoke out of us in the audience, that's what's different. So thank you for watching this review. That concludes my review of all 10 parts of Band of Brothers. I do hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to go back and watch it if you missed any of the parts. And feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe. And also, I would love to hear from you. Let me know, what did you think of points down below? I would really love to hear your thoughts on it. And also, just let me know your thoughts on Band of Brothers as a whole. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to my rewatch of it. Well, rewatch of it all but one part. Just because I wish I had said that. Actually, I did say it in part 9 in that review. But I don't know if I can ever rewatch that part anytime soon. Just too much emotion. And I guess stop talking about it, otherwise I'll get in that emotional heartstring again, and I probably won't be able to finish my video properly. Yeah. But that's just how emotional recalling that was. So thank you for checking out the compilation of my reviews for Band of Brothers. I hope you found them insightful. If you haven't done so already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell so you can stay up to date on all the different content I cover: Star Wars, Star Trek, anything really that I find interesting, you'll see covered on the channel. Also, consider checking out the links that are down below: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, Reddit, Discord, Patreon, all that's down below. So check that stuff out if you are so interested. And as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. Have a good one. Bye!